Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, Future-Proof Your ERP, Cloud Results Without a Full Migration. I'm Kristen Kirkendall, Manager at Project Partners, and I'll be your host. I'm excited to be joined by my colleagues, Randy Zulsdorf, who will be moderating the discussion, Bruce Mahan, along with John Cecil. Before we dive in, just a quick housekeeping note. We'd love to hear from you throughout the entire session, so please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A feature in the platform. We'll set aside a time at the end of the webinar to address as many as we can. With that, let's get started. Randy, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Kristen. As mentioned, my name is Randy Zulsdorf. I'm the Business Development Manager here at Project Partners. And today we are going to be talking about your path to cloud. So very quick, our agenda for today, we'll be covering some quick introductions at the beginning here, which then we'll jump right into the planning and preparation stage of your cloud journey. In this phase, we'll cover practical steps you need to take to ensure both you and your environment are ready, and key considerations and questions you should be asking yourself. We'll then jump into the three different pathways for today's discussion, which is EBS to OCI, a hybrid approach, and EBS to cloud ERP. And finally, at the end, we will be discussing, or we'll be answering all the questions you guys ask. So just a quick overview of Project Partners, an ITG company. We have over 25 years of experience helping over 500 different customers. Sorry about that. Empowering project-centric organizations for over 25 years with over 500 successful implementations worldwide. We'll bring a deep industry expertise across both public and private sectors. And as a global tier 3 partner, ITG specializes in guiding organizations through complex business transformations, ultimately help you improve your project management practices and maximize your Oracle technologies. Whether you're working with Oracle EBS, JD Edwards, Primavera, Oracle Cloud, and other Oracle applications, our global team delivers a hands-on support from initial assessment through implementation and ongoing management. We have two speakers for today. So the first one's going to be Bruce Mahan. He is the VP of our ERP practice at Project Partners with over 36 years of experience, both on the customer side and consultant side. So Bruce, go ahead and give yourself a quick introduction.
All right, thanks, Randy. Good afternoon, everyone. As Randy said, my name is Bruce Mahan. I'm the VP of the ERP practice here. I've been with Project Partners for close to 11 years now. My background, as Randy said, I came from the ERP side as not only a consultant, but I started out as the customer. I've spent a lot of years working in project controls capacity across numerous industries, mainly commercial power and oil and gas, maritime construction. And I bring that expertise to the table when we go through our implementations across the various industries that we support. Looking forward to providing everyone with some great information today to help you make your decisions around how to proceed on your journey to the cloud.
Thank you, Bruce. Next is John Cecil, who is the North American Sales Executive for Quistor, also known as John the Sales Guy. He's been helping customers for over 25 years on their Oracle digital transformation, both in ERP and cloud technologies. John, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, nice to meet you all today. I appreciate it. Can't wait to go through this with you. Along my journey for the many, many years, I've been working with customers in the cloud environment and helping them transform their business and helping them achieve business drivers that mean something to the bottom line or help them, advance their competitive stance in their industry. So we'll talk about those things. We'll have open discussion as we go here. And please, again, feel free to ask questions out there. We'll have the Q&A at the end, and we look forward to taking you on this journey.
Thank you, John. So what we'll be covering today in this webinar ultimately is, as mentioned on the agenda, the planning and preparation stage, ultimately trying to help you ask the right questions and build a successful roadmap. But ultimately, our goal for this call is to understand which paths you can take. Not one path fits all. So we're going to discuss the OCI and Oracle Cloud ERP, understand the pros and cons, the timing, considerations you should make before you make that move. And then for each pathway, we'll have case studies. So we'll be discussing how our current or past customers have gone down these same exact journeys, things they ran into, and ultimately how we've helped them get to that endpoint with a successful implementation. And then finally, at the end, we'll have a quick talk about the readiness assessment tools that we have available for our customers. So when you are ultimately ready to take that path, we can help you kind of evaluate your current state and build that ERP roadmap. And with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Bruce and John.
Okay, thanks, Randy. So what we're going to talk here first is the obviously first thing you need to do, which is your planning and your preparation for your journey to the cloud. And the first thing you really need to do is conduct what we would call a cloud readiness assessment. And during this assessment, you would document your current solution, no matter what it is, whether it's EBS, whether it's a different ERP system, whatnot, and any integration points that you would have with other systems. If by chance, let's say you have a separate payroll system or things like that, then you need to understand what your integration points are. You also need to identify your bottlenecks in your current state and your pain points in your current state, and evaluate it for potential updates to processes, tools, could be configurations on the system as well. And once you identify your gaps to what you're trying to do versus where you're at, then you need to really be able to understand those guys and then be able to come up with solutions around those. And in some cases, when you're looking at the solution portion of it, it's going to really be determined by which path you take regarding, do I take the EBS path into OCI, or do I take or if I'm going from EBS into cloud ERP? There could be different solution gaps involved in each one and different ways to address them. Then you would have development of a change roadmap, and then you should come out of this with a timeline and an effort for what the implementation would be. Now, focusing on the change roadmap portion, it's not just about the change that you're looking at and change in process or change in tool. You also need to be looking at what you need to do from a resource perspective, as in regard to, like, how do we make sure we get where we want to go? And we'll talk more about that in an upcoming slide. John?
Yeah, I think one of the important things here when we look at the planning preparation that I've run into with our customers is really looking at their technical debt and then their business initiatives going forward. And how do those play together? And what things can we get rid of? What things can we implement more of? What are the business drivers that we need to accomplish as we go through this process? Because it's not just about picking up and moving to a new system. It's also about how do we reinvigorate and reinvent what we're doing and drive, business process consolidation and streamlining our IT processes. And then last, how do we measure those things and what are measurable pieces that go there? A lot of the customers will sit there and they will not necessarily put as much effort it needs to be in the planning and preparation. But I just liken this to, building a house. If you don't build your foundation, it's pretty hard to build the rest of the house. So we'll work on you with this. We'll get your roadmap and help you implement the things you need.
So to build off that a little bit, John, so question for Bruce and yourself. Some organizations choose to skip that assessment phase. What things have you guys seen happen when customers choose to skip that phase in their cloud journey?
Well, it's a couple things. It's either they skip it or the assessment didn't go into enough depth, right? Or two things that I've seen. And if the client has not done a proper assessment, no matter which model you pick, right, it leads to basically going into the unknown, if you will. When you're trying to do your project, you end up with severely risking your ability to implement, deliver the change that you're trying to bring to the organization. You could have, significant cost overruns due to timeline impacts, and also upheaval within the organization because change is not properly assessed. Change management is a key component that needs to be evaluated here is like, how much change are you bringing to the organization, and making sure you have a plan in place to properly address that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I find in this whole process is, without the planning, you end up doing a lot of remediation at the end. Your end user testing may not meet the requirements in which you need, and so it could slow the projects down. But at the end of the day, getting everybody involved, I use a statement many times, and this is a visual that I have a slide that it's not in here, but I use it when I present to customers. It's a big knife, and it's like fingerprints on the murder weapon. You want as many people involved in this assessment in business. Otherwise, included or include.
It looks like John Cecil is running into some internet connectivity issues. So
Yeah.
we'll get back to that thought in just a
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, I'll take it from here on the next slide. So, when you're into your assessment, what you want to do is make sure you're asking yourself the questions you see here on the screen, and that you're properly challenging yourself. What is it that you're really trying to accomplish? What is it that we need to resolve, right? Because that's going to help you identify your goals. Okay. Once you have your goals and objectives identified, then you move into, how do we achieve this? How much, is it, a new software set? Is it staying on the ERP system or on, such as EBS, and going to an OCI model? Those kinds of things. What's the resource demand that on us to deliver the change, right? And that really plays into a very key component I was talking to earlier, that, what I've seen in the past is organizations that can fully dedicate or take the majority of their internal resources time and dedicate them to an initiative like this, especially when you're doing a big change initiative, have more success than those that totally rely on, a system integrator, or can only can very minimally part-time invest their own resources. Once you get through this, how do we achieve our goals? That's where you get into the area of, like, this is where the big decision is going to come. You're going to be looking at, how much change will our decision bring to the organization? So, when you're looking at, are we a risk-averse organization, or are we willing to take some risks? That plays into this as well. And then once you've properly addressed these three key components here, then this helps you avoid later on, when you're in the initiative, to get the feedback of, why are we doing this? What were we thinking? This is crazy. We should never have done this. If you can do the work up front, then you can minimize having to deal with those types of questions. They're going to come up regardless of how much effort you put into this. It's just that you need to do this to minimize this, because that's taking you away from your focus of delivering the solution that you've chosen.
And Bruce, kind of the build off of these questions, who from the business should be involved in each of these questions here to, ensure the correct people are?
Yeah. So what we typically see is that, like, the what we want to accomplish, what's our overarching goals kind of thing. That really comes from your senior management. Could be your C-level individuals that can tell you, like, these are the things that keeping me up at night, that kind of thing. And those are the things that we work to resolve. How do we achieve that? Right. Then that's when you start coming down a few layers in the business, right? You're not, the C-level folks will tell you, this is where our vision is, where we need to go, what we want to do. Okay, great. Now, it's when you get into when you go to that, how do we achieve that? Then that's working more with your subject matter expert types in the various, like financial tracks or supply chain projects, whatnot, to understand what they're doing today and see where business process change can be invoked to accomplish what the senior management's looking for. That once you figure out that, then that drives you back to that change component, which you go back to. It's a mix of your key stakeholders and your senior management on how much change are you guys willing to adopt, willing to take on.
Thank you, Bruce. John, I see you're back. Just want to check in to see if you're available to talk.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me better now. I'm hopefully connected to the network correctly. I think the one thing that I would add here that Bruce brought up is, how much change, that goes to risk. How much risk can you handle, right? And then how much can you tolerate? There's always risk in there, business risk, adopting the new customers, a new forum, all of those kind of things. But just want to make sure that, you understand it. We build contingencies around that and we get people's buy-in, which is really important as you go through this.
All right. So when you look at the different pathways to the cloud, Kristen touched on this and so did Randy earlier when we were starting the webinar off, is that there are several pathways to get you to the cloud. And all of these are viable options. What you have to sort out is what is the viable option for you, right? So if you think about specific scenarios, if you think about, let's work left to right across the slide here. So if you think about an e-business suite to cloud infrastructure approach. So if you're a global firm, right, with multiple entities across the world, and you're running EBS, and you have a load of integrations, you have a very heavily integrate into other tools like Blackline, SideTrade, maybe it's a payroll system, that kind of stuff. And then you've got customizations or extensions that you've done on your EBS environment. Well, this model tends to be the better fit, because what you can do here, as opposed to taking all the effort to figure out how am I going to rebuild all these integrations, how do I address all the customizations and extensions, you can take a quicker turnaround to the cloud infrastructure by migrating your EBS platform into OCI. From a change management perspective, this has minimal impact on the user community, because basically what's going to happen here is that from a functional user standpoint, they're basically going to go to bed on Friday night with one URL that accesses their instance and wake up Monday morning and have a different one. That's the change impact to the user community. Now, from a behind the scenes technical component, there's an amount of effort that has to be done to take you through this migration process, but you can get there quicker in that model. And it gives you time to it allows you to take advantage of the cloud infrastructure that Oracle offers while you're working your way through what is our long range plan around going from EBS into Fusion Cloud ERP. The middle model is more of a hybrid approach, where you see e-business suite going up to cloud infrastructure, and then the e-business suite is working in some capacity while there's some level of Fusion applications delivered. Now, this model will require a longer runtime because you've got Fusion involved, you have integrations involved. You could have, even though it is two Oracle products, the integration between Fusion applications and e-business suite may not be 100% complete to support exactly what your business needs to do. So there may be more work there. And also by doing that, you are introducing, for lack of better terms, some throwaway work, because you're going to build these integrations. At some point, they're going to go away. But if it's a long-term run, then it's, it may be throwaway work, but you get some return on doing the work over time. It's a model that, in my experience, and John can talk to his own, this model for me is not one that I personally run into a lot. I've run into either the one on the far left or the one on the far right, which is straight up take EBS straight to Fusion Cloud ERP. And where you'll see this occur more often than not is in organizations that are in a space of they're not huge. They're not multinational. They've got the ability to move pretty quickly. It's it's all in the U.S. single ledger as an example, and that kind of thing. But either way, all three of these require a deep assessment to help you determine which one is the really the best path for you. John?
Yeah, I think when I look at these two, as Bruce pointed out, you know, this middle one, right? The hybrid approach. The interesting thing to think about there in the hybrid approach is, depending upon the level of customizations in which you have and what modules you're using, some things may make sense to move to Fusion, some things may not. But as you go through this process and we look at the assessment and we look at where things need to land, it's also about the application ecosystem. So it's also the things that are outside of EBS that everything touches, and which is the best way to consume those services, or what services is EBS pushing out to those applications. And then lastly, what are we modernizing within our environment? If you go to the far left, the Oracle EBS to OCI, is that just a lift and shift, or are we actually improving process? What are we doing there to change the environment? If it's just from a technical standpoint of, hey, I have this and I'm moving to this hardware, that's fine. But I would encourage us at the same time to sit there and look at what are the pieces in which of the technical stack that we should modernize, update, take advantage of, and to bring additional businesses to. And then when you get to the far right, as Bruce said, going to your Fusion, what customizations can you get rid of? Fusion is constantly coming out with updates. So, a lot of these things that we used to do as customizations are now becoming standard within the product sets. And so, taking a look at all of those and making the right decisions on your path or your multiple paths to get to where you need to be so you can take care of the customers, your internal customers, your business needs, and still be very competitive out there in the industry.
Bruce, what if I'm in an industry such as construction, engineering, or utilities, that requires me to use other Oracle applications such as Primavera or Unifier? Where do you see those fit within each of these paths?
They can actually fit in any of the paths with no issues. The Primavera products can work agnostic across the landscape that you see depicted here on the screen. So we've done, like we're in the midst of right now of working a project that's a Unifier P6 integration between cloud ERP, right? That eventually will support EPM, right? Meanwhile, over here on the left, we've had several clients where it's a straight tie into EBS. So it can work, there's really no impact to leveraging those applications. You're not bound. As an example, if you want to use those, there's nothing telling that you have to go to cloud ERP to do it, or you have to be in EBS. It doesn't matter from that standpoint.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk about the pros and cons of Oracle EBS to OCI. So as I said earlier, the pros here is minimal change management. Remember, you're from a user perspective, user experience perspective, no change. I mean, there's the tool looks the same, behaves the same, unless you've done an upgrade. Maybe there's some form changes or something, but nothing catastrophic. There's no data conversion required. Whereas if you're going from EBS up to Fusion ERP, then you're going to have to do a data conversion and migrate data over that way. Generative AI can be adopted via tools like the Ask eBiz that's out now. You have a quicker rollout model, as I mentioned before. It doesn't take as long to do this as it does to do an EBS to cloud ERP. All your custom objects, your extensions, customizations, all that, you maintain full access to all that. And it greatly reduces your overall total cost of ownership while improving your scalability. The cons, with this model are, you don't have the application-based generative AI like you're getting in, that's delivered as part of cloud ERP, right? But you still have the capability, right? Um, and then the other thing is obviously around the patching. Like if you go to cloud ERP, this goes back to what John was saying on the previous slide about how the product's being continuously improved. In cloud ERP, you're going to get quarterly release patches. You're going to get them. You can't not take them. It's just the way it works. It keeps everybody that's using the product on the same level. Whereas if you're staying in EBS, then keeping up with all the patching and making sure the patching gets done is really on the client. John?
Yes. So a few other things to think about here is when you're going there that allows you to take advantage is obviously the marketplace out there in OCI. So it allows you to use third-party applications, allows you to do all kind of things and connect to additional services in which you may not have had the access to in the past. Within OCI, as you may know or you may not know, it also allows you have additional services or licensing schemas or other things like that are out there. So when you're moving there, there's a lot of pros, there's some cons, but at the end of the day, it allows you it allows you to take advantage of additional business things in which you may not have been able to take advantage of in the past.
Bruce, John, how would this rollout work for a company that may not have a global EBS environment? So they might have different ERPs between the different entities that they have. How have you seen that work?
What we've seen done before, and we'll actually, I'm just going to jump over to our case study here because this lines up with our case study, right? The only difference on this is a global firm, but the concept would be the same. And that's the fact that what happened here is this particular client had multiple ERPs in place, but what took place was EBS was migrated to OCI and upgraded. And then what was done is all the other entities they had that were on different ERPs, like JD Edwards as an example, right? Or even different versions of EBS. Eventually, they took on the effort to say, now that we've got this platform up to OCI, we'll start taking those separate ERPs and migrating those entities that are on those separate ERPs into our standard platform, right? And that's so Atkins Realis, as you see, here's the case study. We've been working with them for close to we're getting into year 3 now, I believe, supporting them on this global effort that they're working to get to a solid platform, right? Of a standard platform of EBS, because they're on numerous ERPs right now with JD Edwards and even EBS. So that's all been done from an OCI migration. At this point, we've gotten them live in the UK and Europe and India, which are the 3 largest groups that were on JD Edwards that are now in EBS. And now we're moving over to address Middle East, North Africa, and Canada. So we've scaled them up easily from just to like 22,000 employees that are on this model. And I think by the time we're done, the total hit's gonna be closer to 40,000 employees on the system that we've scaled them up in over basically a couple of years worth of time on the global rollout. So with that, we'll move on over to the hybrid approach. And this, if you remember, this is the one that was in the middle of our slide. So and I want to clarify something. Hybrid could be 2 models. Okay, one model would be, as we described in our discussion on the slide related to the approaches, is that, hey, I've got some of my company on EBS, but I'm just going to make something up here. I'm using supply chain on the cloud, but I'm doing my financials on EBS. Okay. Another model would be is you're a global company, right? And you're on whatever ERP system you're on, but you're wanting to migrate to the cloud. Now, what you could do is take a smaller entity that runs, a good, use the 80-20 rule. They run 80% of the business processes everybody else runs. Implement them on cloud ERP as your proof of concept, right? And then once you get the proof of concept stabilized, you start rolling out across the globe to your various regions. That's a model we've seen deployed numerous times, and we've had clients doing that now. WSP is one of them. But with this hybrid approach, your pros and cons break down, like, versus scalability and flexibility. You can easily adjust your resources on demand without any major hardware investments. This is basically because you're in the SaaS world at this point. From a cost efficiency approach, you're using a pay-as-you-go model, which reduces your capital and operational expenses, meaning you're reducing your server cost, that kind of thing. Simplified maintenance. Your cloud automation reduces your IT overhead and improves reliability. Combine this with your enhanced security with the built-in compliance and data protection features from your cloud provider. So what that means is that, whoever's providing your hosting of your EBS environment, those security features and data protection functions will come there. From a cons perspective, you have a migration complexity because customizations and your current customizations and/or integrations may require some significant rework. The risk with this approach is you need to make sure that your transition is really planned out well, because if you don't have it well planned and have every thing covered, you could end up with a potential disruption, right? Training needs, this comes into your change management. Your staff's going to end up learning new tools and workflows because they're working in a hybrid space. And you have, what you call a vendor lock-in. You have dependence on the cloud provider's infrastructure and roadmap. So what this gets into is, you think about what we said is available if you're working strictly in EBS. You have full-on capability of writing your own customizations, doing your extensions, and you patch when you're ready to patch. When you're in a cloud environment, you cannot easily customize, right? Because basically what you're going to be doing is integrations, whether internal to the application or external. And you're going to get the quarterly release patches, which really make you reliant. Oracle is going to drive that through their model. There's no way that's going to change. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have that approach. Any questions?
Nope.
So from a case study standpoint, we had a mid-sized enterprise that used a hybrid strategy to maintain Oracle EBS on premise while integrating to Oracle's cloud HCM and CX. So what they did to address this is they used the Oracle Integration Cloud, which is something we'll talk to in a little bit, to synchronize the employee data and the customer interactions to make sure they had near real-time visibility and continuity of employee and customer data. What this allowed them to do was to modernize their HR and customer engagement functions without disrupting any core ERP operations. Typically, what you'll see in a hybrid approach is a model similar to this, where you'll see it, so you're not impacting finance, right? Any of your financial things, your major operational items aren't impacted. A customer will go out and implement something like cloud HCM or CX as their first step. So this resulted with, gave them improved agility, if you will, reduced the overall operational cost, and provided a scalable path for a full cloud adoption. Because now, once this is done, they can start selecting which portions of the organization they'll roll onto the cloud footprint next. So EBS to cloud ERP. So this is the one where we talked about where you would end up having, we talked about, organizations that aren't really necessarily global, with a bunch of integrations and extensions and customizations and that kind of stuff, right? So what happens here is, with the pros on this, is once again, you're going to get the reduction in total cost of ownership, because you've moved away from having to do server upgrades and maintain all that hardware, and your DBAs are doing whatever they're doing. So basically what this means when you think about it, the best way I can frame this is that by going to either OCI or going to cloud ERP, what you're doing is you're moving your business's focus away from focusing on your managing your infrastructure and allowing you to focus on running your business. And I don't think there are many companies out there that really, on their sole purpose is to manage their internal infrastructure. Your applications are continuously improved via quarterly cadence. This is the quarterly patches I was referring to earlier. The applications themselves are delivered with specific generative AI capabilities within those applications. This is a key difference between the cloud ERP product and going to OCI. Leverages near real-time integration capabilities with Oracle Integration Cloud, or OIC. We touched on this a little bit on the previous slide, but what OIC delivers is a way to drive a rules-based integration framework. So if, as an example, in the project space, if a task changes status, then an integration will fire and some action will happen versus running the old batch model that we're all familiar with in the EBS space, where you run the integration 2 or 3 times a day or once overnight. So that way you're getting near real-time data and everything's up to date at that point. The cons with going to cloud ERP is you're going to have significant change management. I mean, the base core functions of what the applications do in cloud ERP is very similar to what happens in EBS. They're going to look a lot different, but there are changes to the workflows and something, when I say workflows, I mean the business processes that will be driven through this process. One thing to bear in mind around cloud ERP is it's just like EBS, it's built around best practice. So if you find that your business is doing something that's out of line with the way the software functions, that means you'll need to take an evaluation of what your business process is to determine what you can change to make it fit the software. And if not, then you're into some kind of past solution to resolve it. Okay. You will have a longer delivery time than EBS to OCI because it's basically, the key difference is EBS to OCI is basically a technical function, technical implementation, whereas EBS to cloud ERP is a full-on functional / technical implementation with all the bells and whistles that you have to go through for that type of work.
I think one of the things to think about here when you're doing this is think about those, as I mentioned earlier, the application ecosystem. So what is connected into it? Because when those updates come, there's a quick testing and sanity checking of those other applications to make sure those integrations, the data flows are still there and everything else. Generally, we don't see any issues there, but there are times when you're doing code updates within other applications and tying them into, the cloud ERP environment. So, putting services around that, documenting all of these things, building the run books, and then having a testing process when those updates come out, because you'll know when they're going to come out. You just don't know the net effect of your infrastructure and your environment. So think about those as you move forward.
So we've kind of just gone through all the 3 different paths, and as we've gone through them, things seem to get a little more complicated just because of the nature of what we're trying to accomplish in this going to full cloud ERP. Do you guys see any kind of challenges or differences done during the assessment phase for each of the paths? Like, is it longer for this specific type of migration to the cloud versus just going straight to OCI? Are there additional things people should think about?
The complexity piece for me in the assessment is really trying, it's what drives the length of any of these, right? And it's not the complexity of the assessment. It's really the complexity of what solution footprint is. right? If it's a straight up, I've got my core financials, GL, AP, AR, FA, right? And I'm running manufacturing, supply chain, and it's, there's no integrations with some third party tool. Okay, those things won't really have much of the timeline will be pretty consistent. When you start looking at things like what I'm going to show you on the next slide here for our case study with Tri-State, this is what you talk about a complex one, right? And so here in this case, you've got a client that's using cloud ERP with core financials, supply chain, and PPM, right? That's the three key pillars within their cloud ERP stand up. They're also using EPM for all their consolidations, reconciliations, financial reporting, and their capital portfolio management. Then on top of that, they also have WAX, which is an Oracle product from the customer care and billing platform for utilities. That's more of a think about the old EA enterprise asset management product you had in EBS. It's basically EAM for utilities, is what it is. And then you add in the fact they're also leveraging Unifier and P6. So there's a lot to digest there, and from a process standpoint, that's where in an assessment you have to look at all that stuff and really evaluate it. And this is where it starts getting tricky, and how the integrations need to work with each other and the different tools need to talk to each other. And really, what you get into something like this is really things like master data management, where you want to make sure that effort is done properly, because you don't want to be having to rely on someone to make the same change in system B so it can properly integrate with system A. The master data elements need to flow properly and that kind of thing. But, as we're discussing, Tri-State, right now, what we did here is they were live on cloud, they were live on their solution. And then we came in and did an assessment after they contacted us and they were having some issues. We got into an assessment phase with them, went through an assessment, identified something like, close to like 150, 160 pain points. But then through that, we prioritized 106 of those pain points to be critical financial issues, right? Because they were having some issues with their month-end close processes. They were not trusting the reporting and the data coming out of the system because of all the manual workarounds and stuff they were doing. And that got them into some financial audit deficiencies that came out once they were live. So we've gone through that work with them and implemented, like I said, 106 changes to their system for that. And now we're in the phase 2 portion of it, where it's more operational type changes than it is financial improvements. But we're working through that scope right now, with delivery expected to be in December of 2025, as noted. But there's upcoming work with them on their capital project management that will be kicking off shortly. It's going to tie us back into working across this multitude of systems that I laid out. Okay. So here's their footprint. As I mentioned, just so you can see, there's 5 high level areas, actually 6, because we've got field service out here to the lower right, which they use to dispatch their maintenance crews. But you can see, from on the left-hand side, here's the construction and engineering applications that Randy asked about earlier, about is there anything that locks us down into which ERP we should use? And the answer is no. But you can see here where they're using Primavera Unifier and P6. Then you look at, from the Fusion application standpoint, you've got enterprise performance management, and then you have the applications listed there from the ERP perspective. And then at the bottom, you have the work and asset cloud service, which is one of Oracle's cloud offerings. So understanding the intricacies of how these systems have to talk to each other, and also understanding how the technology works, in each one of these is something you have to understand in order to make something like this work. So the last thing we got, or next to last thing I believe we have here, is really around the solution design approach. You can see here it's really a 3-step process, and it ties in with our step 1. It goes back to I think the question we showed the 3 types of questions that should be asked, and Randy asked us about what level of leadership should we be talking to, or what types of resources within the company. So step 1 is really when we would meet with executive leadership, right, to talk about, hey, what are your goals and your objectives? What are your pain points? What are your, where you see bottlenecks, that kind of thing. Then step 2, we move more into the IT side, looking at your current footprint, your current architecture, what your current configurations are. This helps us determine, how much are you doing on your current system, which is standard functionality versus custom, or you actually have third-party solutions in play. In step 3, this is where we get into that talking with more, the business leads or the subject matter experts, and we work through the process flows of how the business works. We evaluate, say, okay, this is what you're doing now, which is standard functionality in, let's say, EBS, and you're going to go to cloud ERP, right? All right, no changes there. This all works the same. By the way, this feature has changed. Maybe this standard feature in EBS is different than it is in cloud ERP, or maybe in some cases, the standard feature in EBS doesn't exist in cloud ERP. So these are gaps that you start identifying, right? Then and then so now that you understand what the gaps are, you can work through what are the resolutions to those gaps. It could be a business process change on the customer's end, or it could be, okay, what we have to do is get an integration built or a PaaS solution built to provide the solution. Meanwhile, we can also go back to Oracle through their Idea Lab, and log requests to improve the product and go through that process, which Oracle's been pretty good about, listening to the people nominating items and getting the right votes and prioritizing things to get those things addressed. But at the end of this, what you should come out of this, you come out of this with, as we said, your ability to identify what you're trying to accomplish, what your goals and objectives are, how you're going to get there, right? How do we get there? And then the change management impact of getting there. And the change management is not just a change where we got to go train people on. The change management should also take into account, hey, how do I leverage my internal resources to get the most out of this up front, to get buy-in early, reduce reliance on system integration partners for the future, that kind of stuff. From that, you end up getting a timeline, level of effort to execute, and a roadmap on how to execute what you're intending to do.
Yeah, one of the things I want to add into here too that I think a lot of businesses forget about is when you go through this design approach and everything else, building in training and training needs of the staff of what it's going to change. What are they going to see different that they're not used to seeing? What does the screen look like? All of those kind of things, because we're very, set in the way we do our business and our business process every day. Is that going to be the same? How do I get to this file? How do I get to that screen? Where is that navigated? What about my landing page? What does my landing page look like? And how do I navigate to that? How do I get my reports? How do I print my reports? And so, those are a lot of things that you want to make sure that are also covered as you go through this approach, and identifying that, and also creating enough time for that. Because one of the things that we've found out over time is that the more intimate you can get with the end users and the business users and understand what they're doing day to day, and then what day 2 is going to look like when you bring this in, and then bridging that gap and getting their comfort, to go and accept the system, they're going to be way happier. And the help desk tickets are going to go down. The functional questions are going to go up initially, because they're going to be the how do I and show me where it's at, compared to I know what I'm doing. So as we go through this process, we'll also bring in those pieces of it at the same time.
Awesome. Thank you, John, Bruce, and Randy. We covered a lot of great topics. A few questions came through that I would like to pose back to you guys. So the first question that came through was, if I move EBS to OCI now, what will that investment help smooth the path to cloud ERP later, or will I have to face a lot of rework?
Well, you shouldn't face a lot of rework, right? Because so let's clarify a little bit here. So when you take EBS to OCI, what you're changing is where your data resides and that kind of thing, right? So your EBS instance, if you will, is now in a SaaS space, right? And you get the advantages of that because you've got the scalable database, you've got the faster processing. I think was Atkins Realis reported that they saw a 30% gain in processing speed running with less processors. Okay. So you get those kind of wins out of it. From how does this impact me going to cloud ERP? What it does is it gets you the advantage of being on the cloud platform with your EBS model and giving you more time to properly bake out what your migration to cloud ERP is going to look like versus trying to go straight to cloud ERP with an environment that has a lot of integrations, a lot of customizations, that kind of thing. It's not so much a rework thing. I would say it would help you avoid a ton of rework because you have more time to properly plan.
Awesome. John, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, Bruce hit it. I mean, it was perfect. I think, I will say one thing is that, once you get to the OCI platform, like Bruce said, the ability to take advantage of other services are there. It'll allow you to reevaluate your business processes. Those are going to continually change when you go to cloud ERP as it continually gets better and better and better and has more things in it. And you can reduce a lot of the customizations of what you have. So, I would not say that any of that work is thrown away. It's all valuable work, and it's going to allow for an easier transition if you move into the hybrid model or if you go all the way into fusion. So we can help you with those paths, and we can show you logical paths and steps to get there.
Awesome. Thank you. And I believe we touched on this topic just a little bit. And I know, Bruce, you and I have talked about this quite a bit, but how does organizational change differ when moving to OCI versus directly to cloud ERP? Is there like a big difference in those areas?
It's a huge difference. So if you're going from EBS to cloud ERP, right, or even from a non-Oracle ERP to cloud ERP, the change level is going to be significant, right? And what you're looking at, from EBS to cloud ERP is not as significant as it is, let's say, going from JD Edwards to cloud ERP or SAP to cloud ERP, right? But either one of those models going to cloud ERP, there's a lot of change that's going to happen. Because I've yet to go into a client that's on EBS that has not put a single customization in, or doesn't have an integration to a third-party product, or whatever. This just thing, a bunch of custom reports that have to get rebuilt. All that kind of stuff. So there's change right there. And then what you're going to get is you get the look and feel of the applications different than what EBS looks like. Even though Oracle is doing a lot of enhancements to EBS to start having it have more of a look and feel similar to the cloud ERP product, it's still different, right? And then as I said before, you also have cases where processes, and I'm just making something up here, but let's say there's processes in AP that work a certain way, they may not quite be the same when you go to cloud ERP. And then there's also things where functionality that it has existed in EBS for a long time has not quite made it to cloud ERP yet. That doesn't mean you don't go to cloud ERP. You just need to know that, hey, I have this function I've relied on. I need to make sure I've allowed for it when I'm doing my migration. So there's a big amount of change there. And the one thing I would say, and I think John touched on it as well, is that, the change management piece doesn't need to look at just what's changing, from a, comparison, Apple, this is where I was and this is where I'm going, view. It also needs to look at it. How do I get that better user adoption, knowledge transfer in place? And the best way, as I said before, to do that is if you can get your internal resources, your identify those individuals in your organization that you want to commit to that initiative, then you're going to see a return on that it's hard to put into words, but it's significant return in that you get early user adoption, early knowledge, less reliant on SIs for providing support because you've built that up over time. EBS to OCI, not a lot of front end user facing change. It's going to look exactly the same as it did, from day one to day two.
Yeah, I'll just add something real fast. I know we run up against time, but think about the OCI, shift from wherever you're at to OCI. You're going to see better in performance on the hardware, and you're going to see lower needs of CPU memory, etc. So other than that, you go to sleep one day, you wake up the next day, you as an end user have no idea where it's at. Everything looks the same. When you go to cloud ERP Fusion side, I use this as a whole new world. It allows you to really sit there and look at your business and reinvent the business and your business process and your business facts that are out there. Remove a lot of the technical debt and the business debt that slows you down. I loved, I think it was last year at Oracle Cloud World. Oracle came out and said, hey, they use all of this now themselves, and they close their business, within days after the quarter. What took them 6 to 8 weeks to get done, now they have it within days. And so, this product is very, very powerful. And as I talk to customers out there, it's not an if I'm going to go to Fusion, it's when I'm going to go to Fusion. So it's how do we build you and how do we get your baby steps to get there? And so, where is that timeline in your maturity as a company? We'll help you figure that out, and we'll help you understand what you consume and how do you consume it and when you consume it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we are officially out of time. I wanted to, on behalf of everybody here on the call, thank you again for your time and your engagement on the webinar, and thank you to our speakers. All three of you did an amazing job. If you have any questions or wanted to continue the conversation with us, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via email. I have listed here on this slide Bruce and John's email address. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.